All right, let me go across live exclusively to Omar Abdullah, who is, of course, former Chief Minister of Jammu and Kashmir and President of the National Conference, who was there at the meeting. Omar Abdullah, thank you so much indeed for joining us. Let me just start by asking you a big picture question about what you made of today's meeting. How significant did you think it was, or was it along predictable lines?
Look, Vasu, a meeting with the Prime Minister of India is significant. A meeting with the Prime Minister of India coming in the aftermath of the almost 2 years of disquiet that we've seen in Jammu and Kashmir, and in the presence of such a breakdown of trust that we saw on the 5th of August 2019 is significant in itself. To be honest with you, I didn't go into the meeting with any great expectations. I did go with the view to listen. I wanted to hear what the Prime Minister and what the Government of India had in mind in terms of the roadmap ahead, and to place on record some of our misgivings about what had happened over the last couple of years.
Okay. And was that opportunity allowed? Were people able to share their misgivings and their grievances and concerns?
Yeah, the ones that spoke freely, and you had the various political schools of thought, so to speak. You had the BJP talking from its political standpoint. You had parties like the National Conference and the PDP on a completely different political plane. And then you had some of the other more recent political sort of entrants who had a slightly different take on things. So it was a mixed bag, as expected. I don't think when the Prime Minister invited all these parties and participants to participate, I don't think he expected everybody to toe the same line.
Sure.
And if they had, I think the meeting would have been a monumental failure. I think it was important for the Prime Minister to hear firsthand what the various points of view are from Jammu and Kashmir.
Okay.
And in all fairness to the Prime Minister, he heard without any interruption. Both he and the Home Minister didn't interrupt at all, and basically allowed those who spoke to speak freely.
Okay, now let's look at some of the sort of outcomes, if you will, of the meeting. At least this is what we're hearing from the government. And let's take each of those one by one. The first, of course, of the significant, one of the significant sort of announcements appears to have been this commitment to restoring statehood. Tell us a little bit about that. What exactly was said, and do you see that as an important first step?
Well, the Home Minister reiterated, as he said, his commitment that was made to Parliament and subsequently as well. And that was again reinforced by the Prime Minister, that Jammu and Kashmir has to be given statehood. The point that some of the people who spoke made was that it has to be complete statehood. It can't be a truncated state. It cannot be a state which is further stripped of powers. Jammu and Kashmir will have to be a state like West Bengal is, or like Maharashtra is, or Madhya Pradesh is. And one of the points that was made, and made quite forcefully, is that Jammu and Kashmir must have its cadre restored to it. If Jammu and Kashmir is a state, then why should its officers come from the UT cadre or any of those other sort of setups? J&K traditionally had a J&K cadre in the IAS and IAPS and elsewhere, and that cadre should be restored.
Okay, so several of you said that emphatically about statehood, that to the government's contention that they will restore it, that it has to be full statehood. Was there any response to the government to that? That they were amenable to that, or they just listened?
No, the government listened. They did talk about statehood, but I think it was important from our point of view to put it across. What we understand by statehood, and what we would be willing to accept And I think it's been made very clear that statehood means statehood, where all the powers that are available to other full-fledged states are available to Jammu and Kashmir. So again, I make the point that it has to be a state like Maharashtra or Madhya Pradesh or other states, and not a hybrid model. Yeah, not a hybrid model. Look, on the 5th of August 2019, you took decisions which also included removing our cadre. We had a J&K cadre in the IAS, we had a J&K cadre in the IPS. So therefore, if that decision is being reversed and you are taking a union territory and converting it back into a state, then you have to restore our cadre as well. It has to be a full-fledged state. A half-hearted measure will not work.
And what about elections, Omar Abdullah? I mean, was there a sort of general talk of having elections? Was it sort of specifically outlined that elections will happen? And if I can ask an added question, that you had said, and perhaps this may be the view of other leaders as well, that you will not fight elections if Jammu and Kashmir is a union territory. It will only be conditional to statehood being restored.
Look, there was a discussion about elections. Both the Home Minister and the Prime Minister talked about their desire to see elections take place in J&K at the earliest. So from that I understand that it's only a matter of time. So, but Ghulam Nabi Azad Sahab, perhaps expressing a view of a lot of us present there, was that we want statehood restored before elections, not after. But again, there was no response from the government on this. As for what my views are, I've already told you that I'm not looking at contesting any assembly elections for the time being, and most certainly not as a union territory. And I see no reason why I should change that.
But let me ask you, Omar, about what I said in my introduction, that there was this highly unusual situation where many of you who were jailed by this very government were derided as Gupkar gang are now invited to this meeting. You're standing next, in a sense, to the very leaders who jailed you. A, what was that like? And B, did that come up at all? Was there a chance to ask the government about those detentions?
Well, it did come up. It would be impossible for it not to have come up. I mean, it was brought up by quite a few of the speakers who did speak, and the entire trust deficit between the people of J&K and New Delhi, and the attempt to to drive a wedge between the people of Jammu and Kashmir and the rest of India. All of these things came up. Look, I've never been the sort of person to live in the past. It's not in my nature. So the fact that I was detained for 8 months is, I mean, it's part of my history. It's not going to stop me from doing what I have to do for the people of Jammu and Kashmir going ahead. I think it was important that the sentiment of the people of J&K be put in front of the Prime Minister, and that we disabuse people in power in Delhi of this belief that everyone in Jammu and Kashmir supports what happened on the 5th of August 2019. That could not be further from the truth. It would be dishonest on my part to say that there is nobody in J&K who supports it, because obviously there are people who support what happened on the 5th of August. But I think it would be wrong for anyone in Delhi to believe that the people of Jammu and Kashmir unanimously endorse what happened on that fateful day, because that's certainly far from the truth.
And what about Article 370? Did that come up? Did several of you get a chance to question that move, and was there any response from the government to that?
It certainly came up, and parties like mine made our position very clear that we have, the Constitution gives us the right to challenge decisions of the government, and we are going to use that right that is provided to us by the Constitution to challenge this very decision in the Supreme Court of India. It is unfortunate that the Supreme Court hasn't found time to start hearings in this matter.
Right.
But we are not going to stop. And as some of the participants reminded the Prime Minister that his party waged a campaign almost 7 decades long for the removal of Article 370. So if we have to wage a campaign that is 70 months long or 70 years long or 70 weeks long, however long it is, to have the decisions of the 5th of August 2019 undone, we will do it.
Okay.
But we will do it peacefully, we will do it legally, and we will do it constitutionally.
Okay.
We will not take the law into our own hands, and we won't put people in harm's way to achieve our stated aim.
But you know, the big question, Omar, which has sort of overshadowed this whole process is what happened. You know, we still don't have an explanation about what changed. Why abruptly was this meeting called? Why were all of you who were being attacked so directly by the government invited? Was there any explanation for that, or if not, what do you make of it?
Look, in all fairness, Vasu, we didn't seek an explanation and one wasn't forthcoming. You don't normally ask your host as to why you're invited. We were there as guests of the Prime Minister at the invitation of the Prime Minister.
Right.
It's for the Prime Minister to know why at this juncture he invited us. Though, in fairness to the Prime Minister, what he did say was that he had actually wanted to have a meeting like this a long time ago.
Okay.
And that he had wanted to follow the DDC elections and the Panchayat elections with a meeting like this.
Right. DDC
but the
is
country
the
got swept up with COVID.
Right. Yes.
The District Development Council elections, the third tier of local government. But the country got swept up by COVID, and a meeting like this wasn't possible. In fact, he did make the point that this has been the largest in-person meeting that the Prime Minister has had since the onset of COVID last year.
Okay,
so I think that is pretty significant as well.
But Omar Abdullah, fair enough. You may not have, proprieties do not permit people to ask their host, as you said, why did you invite us? But what do you think changed?
I'm not going to speculate, and most certainly not on the record. One of these days when we meet over a cup of coffee, we can shoot the breeze, and I'll tell you what I think, but I have no way of making an informed, categorical opinion, so I'd rather not do that on air.
Okay, very last question. When you were describing the meeting, you said leaders spoke and said A or B. What about you? I mean, are you referring to you? Did you get a chance to speak?
I didn't speak. I didn't speak.
Why is that, if I may ask?
Time ran out.
Okay.
It seems that time ran out. But my father spoke, which is more important. He's the president of the party. I am the vice president.
Okay.
I obviously would not have differed with what my father had to say. That's not to say that I wouldn't have made more points that perhaps he hadn't made.
Sure.
But this is but one meeting in the Prime Minister's stated aim, as he said, Dil ki duri or Dilli ki duri. Both have to be reduced, in which case this will not be a one-off meeting. There will be other meetings, and I'm sure I'll get an opportunity to say my piece at some point or the other.
Okay.
The important thing is that we spoke our minds. We spoke our minds without any reservation and without any fear.
Right.
And we espoused the views of the people that we represent, and that's all that we can ask for.
No, that's at least an important first step. And you had a chance to say at least some of what you had on your mind tonight, I guess, on just now. So, but here's hoping that we'll finally see some of the unlock that has been going on in Kashmir for so long. But thank you so much indeed, Omar Abdullah, for coming on and spending so much time with us. Thanks very much indeed.